I yield 1 minute to the distinguished Democratic leader who on her first trip overseas went with me to Iraq to talk to the troops and tell them how much she supported the troops. Gentlewoman from California, I yield to her.
The distinguished minority leader is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, at the opening of the debate, Mr. Skelton asked the House to observe a moment of silence for the 2,500 troops that we have lost in the war in Iraq. The number is a staggering, but we warn them one person at a time. I hope their families live with great pride. I know they will live with great sorrow. My uncle was killed at the Battle of the Bulge, and for my father's entire life, it was as if it had happened yesterday. As if it had happened yesterday. We know that experience has been repeated over and over again across our country. In remembering those who died and their families who mourn them, let us also salute all of our men and women in uniform who are doing their jobs with great courage, with great patriotism and dedication, and their families who are making enormous sacrifices. 2,500 killed, 18,000 wounded, more than half of them permanently. The strain on our military readiness and the eroding of our reputation in the world. And the President of the United States says, stay the course. Stay the course? I don't think so, Mr. President. It's time to face the facts. On every important aspect in the Iraq War, President Bush and his advisors have been wrong. Wrong on the reason to go to war, wrong on the reception our troops would receive, wrong on the rapidity with which the Iraqi economy would be able to pay for the war and the reconstruction, and wrong on the willingness of the international community to join in efforts to stabilize Iraq. But don't take my word for it. This gross incompetence has driven some of our fighting generals to level devastating public criticism. Major General John Batiste, who led the First Infantry Division in Iraq, has said, and I quote, "My own decision to speak out goes back to watching firsthand the arrogant and contemptuous attitude of Rumsfeld as he ignored the advice of military experts during preparations for war, and then living with the impact of those strategic blunders as a division commander in Iraq. Secretary Rumsfeld and his team turned what should have been a deliberate victory in Iraq into a prolonged challenge. That is why, over 2 years ago, I asked for the resignation of Secretary Rumsfeld, and I do so again today. No one has been held accountable for all of these mistakes in Iraq. The incompetence comes at a great cost. The Bush administration is so obsessed with the effort to paint an optimistic picture of the situation in Iraq that it refuses to face the facts. The facts are these. More than 2,500 American troops have been killed. Again, more than 18,000 have been injured, half of them permanently. And as the war costs have grown to over $400 billion, key reconstruction projects remain unfinished. As defense and intelligence expert Anthony Cordesman recently wrote, and I quote, "The U.S. aid process has failed. It has wasted at least half of the sum, the $22 billion in U.S. funds and much of the $34.6 billion in Iraq funds it attempted to use to secure and develop Iraq's economy." I repeat, defense and intelligence expert Anthony Cordesman recently wrote, "The U.S. aid process has failed. It has wasted at least half of the $22 billion in U.S. funds and much of the $34.6 billion in Iraq funds in an attempt to secure and develop Iraq's economy." This is outrageous. Where is the accountability? In fact, Mr. Cordesman concludes that the U.S. managed Iraq reconstruction efforts have been as failed as the U.S. response to Hurricane Katrina. The Bush-Iraq policy has diverted resources and attention from what should be the focus of our effort against terrorism in places like Afghanistan. The lack of stability and the